Joining us on the phone, NBC News papal contributor, Catholic bishop from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, Robert Barron. I am so sorry to you. You are watching this scene just as we are on television. As a man of faith who leads the Catholic Church on this, the holiest of weeks, how do you feel?
Well, it's devastating, and I can speak very personally. I spent 3 years in Paris doing my doctoral studies. I lived about a 10-minute walk from Notre Dame. I used to give tours at the cathedral every Wednesday to English-speaking tourists. I've had, a very profound spiritual connection to that place. The windows there have meant the world to me, the preaching I heard there. To me, it's an extraordinary symbol of the Catholic faith, and a place I have a very deep personal connection to. So I'm actually in the car heading into L.A., and I just got the news about this, and I'm heartbroken. A building that survived 800 years of revolution and war and everything else, to think that it might be in danger of being destroyed is just overwhelming to me.
Have you seen the images yet?
I've not. Someone sent me, I'm still in the car, and someone did send me, I've been glancing at them, some of the images, but so is it the transept area, or the windows compromised?
Not yet.
You said that the spires collapsed, huh?
Yeah, Bishop Bob, it's Ann Thompson, and I am so sorry to talk. Hi, I'm so sorry to talk to you under these circumstances because, like you, Notre Dame is a very special place to me too. You said you gave tours there, and one of the things somebody mentioned that this is a cathedral. While it has this stone edifice, on the inside there's a lot of wood. Is that correct? Would that make this fire go quicker?
Yeah, the roof especially would be more, wood and metal and that sort of thing. Mostly stone. I'm most worried about the glass, because you've got glass in that cathedral from the Middle Ages. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And the North Rose window, and I'm gathering that the flames are quite close to that, is one of the finest works of art in Western art, period. And I'm most concerned about that from an aesthetic standpoint. Symbolically, it's hard to overstate, the importance of it for Catholics, for the French, too. Believers and non-believers. It's in many ways a symbol of the country. Distance in France is measured from the Parvis, the plaza in front of the cathedral. It's the symbolic heart of the country in many ways. So it's devastating, I think, to all the French and Catholics around the world.
Yeah, so far, from what we can tell, that rose window, the north window that you are most concerned about, it does not appear to be compromised at this point. We were talking earlier, and look, the Parisians have long ago given up sort of being practicing Catholics, although they are cultural Catholics. So what's the significance? What's the cultural significance of Notre Dame? And why would this be such a blow to Parisians?
Well, you're right. Just from a purely cultural standpoint, in some ways it sums up the French spirit. It's one of the loveliest covered places in the world. If you like Gothic architecture, perhaps only Chartres would surpass it in terms of its beauty and its integrity. So it's one of the great works of art. But it's at the center of Paris, in a kind of a geographical sense and a cultural, spiritual sense. And, I wouldn't want to give up completely. You're certainly right that secularization has advanced in France. But still, I think you scratch the surface a bit, you're still going to find a Catholicism that's alive. And nothing would symbolize that more fully than Notre Dame. So I think it's stirring the French soul, even in those who might claim that they're largely secularized. But anybody who's sensitive to European cultural history will be devastated by this.
You gave tours in the cathedral. Give me a sense of, for people who haven't been in there, what is that moment when somebody goes into Notre Dame for the first time? What is that sense of awe or wonder that you saw people express?
Yeah, and the Gothic architecture, of course, points famously upwards. So all the lines and the pointed arches and everything is meant to draw the spirit and the vision up. So it's the sense of the transcendence of God. And when you step out of the brightly lit, exterior and you go into the darkness of the cathedral, it's meant to sort of blind you. But then as you move through it, it gets increasingly bright, and that's by design. The windows become brighter. The idea is you stay within the life of the church and you move from the darkness of sin to light. But then the windows, to me, are the most magnificent feature. And I often recall in my very first day in Paris, 1989, when I first arrived, I just walked down to Notre Dame and I looked at that North Rose window, and I stayed there for a half an hour and then went back every single day until Christmas when I went home. I stood at that same spot and looked at it. Paul Claudel, the great playwright, was converted to Catholicism in that same spot, looking up that window. And so that's the spiritual power that the art can generate.
And I can remember taking my nephew, Liam, when he was 15 to Notre Dame, and we went up the towers. And, of course, he, being a 15-year-old boy, was fascinated by the gargoyles that are there.
Of course. And that's one of the brilliant features of Gothic art, is that the buildings are covered with the whole of creation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, that some of it, somehow all of it belongs to God and to God's purposes. What I love, too, up in those towers, which I climb many times, is you'll see sculptures that would be totally invisible from the ground. You'd have to go up and around the back of a tower to see it. The point is, they weren't done for the people so much, they were done for God. The sculptor would have made that for God's glory, you know. And so you see those beautiful touches all over a cathedral like that. Nature is all over it, planets and trees and animals and so on, because all of creation is implicated in God's providence. The Gothic churches speak that very beautifully.
Bishop Barron, as a tour guide, help us understand who visits this cathedral, because it's so much more significant than to Catholics alone. Tourists from around the world come.
Oh, sure. I used to give the tours every Wednesday at noon, and no matter what time of year, I would just get on a microphone and say there'll be a tour in English at noon, and I'd get, you know, in the tour season, I get hundreds of people. Even in the off season, I'd get 75 or 100 people any time of the year. So, yeah, I think it's the most visited site in Paris, even more than the Eiffel Tower. So people are spiritually drawn there, and there's been a sacred building on that site. So there's a cathedral that predates this one, but then before that there was a Roman temple. Before that there was a more primitive temple. So it's been a sacred site for millennia on that beautiful Ile de la Cité in the middle of the sun. So it's a charged spot. I think that's fair to say.
Just a few moments ago, the Archbishop of New York, Cardinal Dolan, sent out this tweet, quote, "I just went next door to our own beloved cathedral, St. Patrick's, to ask the intercession of Notre Dame, Our Lady, for the cathedral at the heart of Paris and of civilization, now in flames. God preserve this splendid house of prayer and protect those battling the blaze." Bishop, clearly Cardinal Dolan sharing the same sentiment you are about the significance of this cathedral and the history of it all.
Absolutely, and he's a good friend, and he's someone who is a historian of the church, and so he would know the enormous significance of that place. I go back in imagination to the time of the French Revolution, you know, when it was really desecrated, and there was a very, very real danger that it would be destroyed by the revolutionaries, and it somehow survived that time. And think of the wars it's been through, and that's why it's heartbreaking even to imagine that it might be destroyed.
And Bishop Barron, we've also gotten a tweet from the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, who says, "My heart breaks for the people of Paris after seeing the fire at Notre Dame Cathedral, praying for everyone's safety." And I can tell you that there have been not more than one or two tweets praying for the safety of the firefighters as they now try to stop the fire and rescue the other precious works of art that are in there. Earlier this afternoon, Bishop, I mentioned that there are relics in the spire. There were 3 relics. One was a crown, a thorn that's believed to be from the crown of thorns that Jesus Christ wore on the day he was crucified, and then 2 relics from St. Genevieve and St. Denis. What are the significance of relics in the Catholic Church, and why would those be huge losses to the Church?
Well, it'd be enormous. Relics, of course, are just are remnants. They might be the body itself of a saint, part of the body of a saint, or something the saint had been in touch with. It's just a vivid reminder of the facticity of these great figures. The crown of thorns. Now, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of that. When I was in Paris, it was kept in the trésor, like the treasury. But I never heard that it was in that spire. I hope not, because that was going back to the time of Louis IX, St. Louis, who brought that crown of thorns, and they built the Sainte-Chapelle as the housing for it. It was spirited away during the Revolution for safekeeping to Notre Dame, and indeed I saw it there when I was in Paris. But it was in the treasury.
And where's that?
So that was in the. It was like a little lower section off of the main part of the cathedral. I don't remember it being in the spire. Saint Geneviève is the great protectress of Paris. Saint Denis is the patron of Paris. The man who evangelized that region. So they're very important figures. And for Catholics, relics are of great significance.
These images are devastating. We're watching on the lower right hand of your screen that spire that collapsed about 20 minutes ago, 750 tons. Bishop Barron, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing these insights.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.